One of the solutions attempted to solve the Great Depression of the 1930s involved shipping Northlanders even farther north. Northern News Now's Dave Anderson tells us about the Matanuska colony in this week's Holding On to History.
Movie theater newsreels of the 1930s had plenty of stories about the Great Depression. The New Deal tried to solve the problems, but at least one farm program didn't do the job. Among the hardest hit by the Great Depression from 1929 to 1941 were upper Midwest farmers.
There was no work, and then enter the Dust Bowl era, and crops and farmers were really struggling. Aitkin native and former farmer Jared Steele tells us that 203 Northland families were recruited by the government to build better lives in the Matanuska Valley north of Anchorage, Alaska. The Matanuska colonists, including 20 families from Superior, left for Alaska in May 1935. Nobody told them the valley's farmland had to be cleared of timber first. Then, a measles outbreak ripped through the colonist camp, and disgruntled farmers sent President Roosevelt a telegram.
6 weeks passed, nothing done. No houses, wells, road inadequate, machinery, tools, government food undelivered.
It also turned out that the thin glacial soil of the Matanuska Valley was even thinner than the thin glacial soil of the Northland. By November, many colonists like Theodore Giblin of Duluth were heading home.
Give me the poorest land in the United States, and I'll take it rather than the best land in Alaska.
14 of the St. Louis County Matanuska families came back with Giblin, leaving all their belongings behind because they were too expensive to ship. The failure of the Matanuska Valley colony didn't surprise Jared Steele when he pried open the history books.
The soil's not great. Having grown up on a farm, there's certain things you need, and Alaska just didn't present that to them.
Holding on to history in Duluth, Dave Anderson, Northern News Now.
And by 1965, only 20 of the Matanuska were still farming in the valley. The town of Palmer, Alaska was founded by the Northlanders who stuck it out despite those tough conditions.